In this video, I want to have a look at products, sums, and factors. So the way we're going to structure this is like this. We've got a cross here. We're going to be given two numbers. So we're going to be given the sum and the product. And what we want to do is find the factors. So what that means is, for example, in our first one, we want to find two numbers, two factors, that multiply together to give 6. So that's their product. And they add together, or their sum, is 5. Now, the reason we want to do this is because it's going to help us factorize quadratic expressions later on. But for now, we just want to practice finding these numbers. So I always start these problems by having a look at the product and thinking about the possible combinations of things I could multiply together to get a 6. So for example, in here, I could do a 1 and a 6, or I could multiply 2 and 3 together. So either of those combinations will multiply together to get 6, but I also need my combination, my pair, to add together to give 5. So 1 and 6 isn't going to work, but in this case, 2 and 3 will. So I'm going to write my 2 and my 3 in here as my factors. For our second problem, we still have a product of 6, but this time we wanted a sum of 7. So that's going to change it. We've still got our possible factors written up here, but this time my 2 and my 3 only added to 5, so that's not going to work. What we're going to have to use for this one instead is my 1 and my 6, because they'll still multiply to give 6, but they'll also add to give 7. All right, if we move over the other side, we're having a look now at ones that involve negatives too, so they become a little bit trickier. So this time we want a product of -10 and a sum of 3. So because we want a product that's negative, that means we're going to have one of our factors negative and one of them positive. So start off thinking about things that you can multiply together to give 10. So we could have a 10 and a 1, for example, or we could have a 5 and a 2. Now, if we want them to add together to give 3, remember that one of these has to be negative as well. So we want to see if we can put a negative on one of those numbers in that pair to make it so that when we add them together, we get a 3. So the 10 and the 1 won't ever work because we can't use a 10 and a 1 to get to a 3, but the 5 and the 2 could if that is a -2 instead. So if we do 5 times -2, that does give us our -10. And 5 plus -2 is just 5 minus 2, which gives us our 3. So that means our factors are 5 and -2. Our fourth example, we've got a 12 and a 7. So if we started thinking about things that we can multiply together to give 12, we could have 12 and 1, we could have 6 and 2, or we could have 3 and 4. So again, we also want them to add up to give us a 7. So in this case, it's going to have to be our 3 and our 4. All right, and in our last example, we've got a product of -80 and a sum of -2. So again, just start thinking about the 80, ignore the negative for a second. If we're looking at 80, we could have 8 and 10, for example. Now that, I'm going to stop there. I'm not going to write it down all my other possible combinations because my 8 and my 10 can help me get to that -2. Remember, I need one of them to be negative. So if I had a -8 and a +10, if I added those two together, that would give me a +2 if I add them. And that's not what we want because we want a negative. So that means we need to try it the other way around. So if I had a +8 and a -10 instead, when I add those two together, I will get my -2. So my factors in this case are going to be 8 and -10. So that's having a look at figuring out factors that'll give us particular products and sums.